At the Mississippi Arts and Entertainment Experience in Meridian, we believe in the power of the arts, storytelling, and education, just like Mississippi Public Broadcasting. MPB connects communities across the state with quality programs that inform, inspire, and engage. Their audience is loyal and appreciative of businesses that support public broadcasting, which makes underwriting on MPB a smart investment. Join us in supporting MPB. Learn more at mpbfoundation.org.
Together through the years, together in the future. MPB, your stories, our mission.
Hitch up your britches, Mississippi. It is Wednesday, November 19th. The year is flying by from MPB Think Radio. This is the Sit Down with Russ Latino, where we explore the ideas and people that are shaping Mississippi's future. Today, we've got a great program for you. Joining us top of the hour, State Auditor Shad White. We'll dig in a little bit around the governor's race, maybe some of the other races that will unfold in the near future, 2027, as well as some stuff that's coming up this legislative session. Redistricting is a hot topic across the country as the Supreme Court takes up a Voting Rights Act case. Lots of other stuff going on in Mississippi. And then at the 10:30 break, we will be joined by Blake Levine, who is a sports reporter here in Mississippi, to talk a little bit about the Lane Kiffin saga that is sweeping the nation. Everybody wants to date the pretty girl. Where will he land? Who will he give the rose to? We'll visit with Blake to get the latest on that. In studio with us now, though, State Auditor Shad White. Welcome back. I think this is your second time with us.
Second time. The Lane Kiffin thing sounds more interesting. Can we do that instead? I feel like I should just give my time to him. Nobody wants to hear about auditing, but I have opinions about Lane Kiffin.
Well, I think everyone has an opinion on Lane Kiffin right now. Mm-hmm. Some of them stronger than others, but let's hear yours, I guess. Why not?
I mean, I think he's done a great job, and Ole Miss fans like myself, we're going to have to give him the time and space to think about what's next, and I'm just enjoying the ride. I mean, I was at Ole Miss from 2004 to 2008, which I think may have been the worst 4 years in the history of the program, and we spent a lot of time in the Grove and not in the stadium, and so to see us win games that, Ole Miss fans are used to losing, like going to Oklahoma and winning, or taking a tough Florida team, scrappy Florida team, and beating them at home, it's been fun. Been fun to watch.
Yeah, there is no doubt in my mind that he has brought Ole Miss to new heights and deserves credit and appreciation for that. I think you take the good with the bad sometimes, and his personality is such that he's a little mercurial and enjoys the trolling that happens on X and other platforms.
I like a little Twitter scrap. It's fun.
You are a little scrappy on Twitter too. I think for a lot of Ole Miss fans, they're grateful. I think they also want some clarity about, where are we moving forward. So we'll talk with Blake a little bit about that, but glad to have your thoughts too. Of course, Secretary of State Michael Watson weighed in and got some attention off of his thoughts on it as well. So, I think everybody at this point is looking at some level at 2027, which is still a ways out, but closer than people might think.
Yeah.
The races will really start to move in earnest sometime at the end of next year, 2026.
Yeah.
Your name is one that regularly comes up for governor as one of many candidates who are considering the race.
Yep.
So do you want to announce that you're running for governor today?
I knew I felt trapped in this moment. No announcement today, but I haven't made a big secret of this. I'm seriously considering running for governor. And really the reason is, I see a lot of our politicians, unfortunately, in Jackson who have failed to step up and offer ideas on how to meet our biggest challenges, and some of them who, frankly, just seem to operate in the best interest of their buddies or not willing to make tough decisions. And I've seen enough brokenness and waste in government to know that we've got to have somebody who's willing to take on tough fights and do tough things, even if it ruffles a few feathers. And so that's why I'm thinking about throwing my hat in the ring at some point. But I don't think we're there yet because we're still 2 years out. So there's plenty of time to keep doing my current job and keep working, keep traveling the state, keep listening to people, and then we'll see where we are a year from now.
Yeah, it's hard to run an 800-day campaign.
Yeah.
And I think, obviously we do have one candidate who has announced, Agriculture Commissioner Andy Gibson has announced that he's running. That's a long slog between the announcement and Election Day in November of 2027. Some of the names that have been mentioned, Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann, Attorney General Lynn Fitch, obviously Commissioner Gibson is already out there. And then you have folks like Tommy Duff, businessman, right? People are curious, is he going to do this or is he not going to do this? Philip Gunn, Gerard Gibbert, lots of names have been floated around as potentials. As you look at the field, it strikes me that you're unique in that we've had several of those folks on with us, and they all give, to some degree, what you would expect them to give as an answer, which is, well, I think all these other people are fine people. I just think that I'd be good, right? You have been willing to mix it up and say, actually, I think some of them would not be good in this post. Does that resonate with you? Or?
Well, maybe it's just growing up the way I grew up. My dad was an oil field pumper. My granddad was an oil field pumper. They just said what they thought, and I can remember sitting around the breakfast table with them every Saturday morning because I'd go to breakfast with my dad and my grandfather, and they'd go to work on Saturdays too. And, these kinds of guys, they don't have any patience for sugarcoating, and I just don't have any patience for sugarcoating. I do think our state is making incredible progress, but we have these big challenges on the horizon. I'll give you an example of just one. I love our universities. I love Ole Miss. I went to Ole Miss. I think our universities have a huge problem in that we're not focusing on degree fields that actually prepare people for real jobs here. And so in order to highlight that problem and offer solutions, you've got to be willing to criticize a couple people. And that's okay. Like if I'm a Saints fan and the Saints are losing every ball game, we need to figure out which players are not upholding their end of the bargain and replace them. So I don't mean any of the criticisms that I'll offer personally. I mean it as a way to suggest better policy so that our state can achieve its potential. And I'm not the guy that's gonna shy away from saying that stuff out loud.
So if you were to run and you're looking at that big crowded field, how do you distinguish yourself from that field? What is it about Shad White that looks different from those other names that are floating around out there?
Yeah, I think that folks see the work that the Auditor's Office has done in finding waste in government and being willing to tell the truth, even if it's uncomfortable, highlighting big challenges that the state has. Some people don't like when we release an audit, so we've released an audit, for example, discussing all the government money, taxpayer money that's gone to nonprofits, and some of it just on the wildest stuff that you've ever seen, stuff you would expect to see in California, Lyft rides to the longest running lesbian bar in New York. Literally, we found taxpayer dollars going to something like that. Some people get uncomfortable when they see us release an audit with the receipts, with all that in there. But I think your normal taxpayer, they want to know where their dollars are going. And so when they see me and the team that I have and the work that we're doing, I think they see somebody who is willing to be blunt about the truth and is willing to take up the mantle and offer solutions to try to make the state better. And unfortunately in politics, for a lot of folks, you get these kind of milquetoast platitudes all the time of we need more economic growth and jobs and education needs to be better. That's all great. Everybody agrees about that stuff. What specifically is the problem and how are we going to fix it? And sometimes when you say those specifics, it ruffles some feathers in the political establishment. But that, I think, is the difference between me and a lot of other people who would potentially run.
So some of that is style, right? I mean, some of that is style. Some of it is what sounds like you suggesting, hey, there's a level of work ethic that's been demonstrated in the auditor's office that you would bring to the next role if you were in the next role.
Yes.
Are there policy differences where you look at a Delbert Hosemann or a Lynn Fitch and say, I can qualitatively make policy differences on these big issues?
I would say this, it's really hard to tell because some of them are not super clear on what they believe about anything. I mean, we were joking earlier, there's a couple of people, I don't know if they're against murder at this point. It's really difficult because some of those folks are not clear about what they want to accomplish and what they actually believe on these issues. So hard to say that I believe X and they believe Y, but I'm very blunt about what I believe, and voters either will like it and they'll support me or they'll find somebody else.
Is there in your mind a 3-point plan? I mean, what is it that you would want to accomplish if you were in that role?
Yeah, I mean, what I think needs to happen over the course of the next 4 to 8 years is, one, we have to cut the fat out of government. My office has found over $800 million worth of money that is just not benefiting anyone. So wasted taxpayer funds, office buildings that we shouldn't be leasing, cars we shouldn't own, all of this kind of stuff. People on entitlement programs who are ineligible to be on there. We need to cut the fat out of state government. That gives us the ability to fund things like a teacher pay increase, gives us the ability to fund roads and bridges. I think another big point in that plan, if you're asking for it, is we've got to pay our police officers more, and we need more of them. Mississippi still sadly has the highest per capita homicide rate in the entire country, and it's not just Jackson, it's some of our outlying urban areas too, Meridian, Greenville, some other places. So we've got to make people safe, and that's a valuable use of taxpayer funds. And three, I would say, we've got to put parents front and center in education. And so for me, that means giving parents more options about where they send their kids to school. But again, it also means reforming our university system and making sure that we're not spending money on crazy woke programs at the universities, especially taxpayer money, that we're funneling money to degree programs that will produce the doctors, engineers, architects, pharmacists, accountants that our state is in desperate need of in the long run. And to do these things, you're going to have to make a few people mad. So for example, in cutting waste, there's some waste that happens because bureaucrats might be a little lazy and they don't get the best deal for the taxpayers. But there's some waste that happens because a lobbyist got in the ear of a legislator or an agency head and they got that deal done for their client. Well, you're going to have to make a couple of those folks mad if you're going to really get government back to a good, efficient program and get the dollars going to where it matters. Those are the first things that come to mind.
So some of your critics look at your activity and say, we don't have a problem with the fact that he's aggressive in the auditor role, but they question whether or not you engage in audits or research or studies or however they want to frame it, not based on this is what the auditor's role is, but based on this will help me gain publicity so that eventually I can run for governor. You've heard some of that criticism from folks. How do you respond to that charge?
Well, this is the weird thing about producing these audits is that the ones that do get public attention are the ones that have controversial elements, things that we found that the taxpayers are paying for that ruffle feathers. We're going to produce an audit. It's coming out, I believe, Monday or Tuesday, which is an audit of programs that provide food to needy children. And in general, our audit found that these programs are functioning pretty well. I'll bet you a nickel that doesn't get a ton of notice. So that's the problem, right? Is that we're constantly producing these audits and publicizing them. Sometimes the things that are a little bit more mundane, that are just part of the job, don't get a ton of press attention. And then the ones that are controversial do, and they say, well, you're just producing audits to be controversial. Well, you missed the other press release from the day before.
A nickel doesn't suggest a whole ton of degree of confidence, by the way, Shad. We've got to up the bet.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I may do a dime next time.
There you go. You're listening to The Sit Down with Russ Latino. We're talking with State Auditor Shad White. We've got to take a brief break, and we'll be back after this.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bobby Rush. As a blues man, I love Mississippi Public Broadcasting. If you support Mississippi music and their local programming, donate now, right now, and become a member today, not tomorrow. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Doesn't matter how big or small, but we prefer big. Thank you very much.
Mississippi is a place of deep roots where every story matters and every voice can be heard. At MPB, we stand with our local communities, bringing you the voices of those who shape our state through local programming that reflects our culture across small towns to big cities, from the Delta to the coast. We tell the stories that define us, from the music that carries our voices to the leaders who inspire change. MPB brings you the heart of Mississippi, celebrating Mississippi one story at a time. MPB, your stories, our mission.
Everlasting, the Legacy Podcast, is a brand new companion podcast to the MPB documentary Everlasting, the life and legacy of Medgar Evers. Join me, Rita Brent, as we dive deeper into the story with exclusive interviews and conversations about the enduring legacy of Medgar Evers. Everlasting, the Legacy Podcast, available on the MPB app or wherever you get your podcasts, with new episodes every other week. MPB, your stories, our mission.
You're listening to The Sit Down right here on MPB Think Radio. I'm your host, Russ Latino, talking today with State Auditor Shad White. And after this segment, we'll be talking with Blake Levine a little bit about the Lane Kiffin situation. So before we shift from this governor's race conversation, there was a poll put out by Terrence Group. And Terrence Group has done a lot of polling for a lot of politicians in Mississippi. I know it's done polling for the lieutenant governor as an example. I think it used to do the polling for Phil Bryant as well as Haley Barbour.
Correct.
So a well-respected group. And really, the poll was on school choice, and it found that 85% of parents, in the poll at least, said that they would prefer to be able to choose where their kid goes to school, which is a big number. But it also asked some questions about the governor's race. One, what did those results look like for you? Because your name is in there. And two, were you surprised by anything?
I wasn't really surprised. I mean, effectively, that poll showed that there's a three-way tie at the top between me, Andy Gibson, and Delbert Hoseman within the statistical margin of error. So that's where you want to be if there's a poll that's going to be run. We were super encouraged when the poll popped out because, one, not only are you in the top echelon, but two, there were a ton of voters, about a third of voters, who have actually never even heard of me or the office and what we're doing. And so that's a ton of people that you can introduce yourself to if you announce for governor. Those are people who get engaged as soon as you actually say, yes, I'm doing this. So tons of runway to move those numbers up. And just from a campaign perspective, how do you improve your standing in a poll? Well, you run a well-financed campaign with a good message that appeals to what people want for the future of their state. And for us, in the last campaign finance report, we had more cash on hand than any other elected official who is considering running in office for office in 2027. I suspect that will be the same when the next campaign finance reports come out. We're getting a ton of our money from all over the state. 98% of the dollars that I raised last year came from inside Mississippi, and it's coming from people who own their own small business in Tupelo, or a nurse or a doctor in Iuka or wherever it may be. So there's a ton of energy and enthusiasm, and I think that that translates into support when you use all that money to run a real campaign on issues that folks care about.
Yeah, and money, I will say this, money will ultimately be a great decider. It doesn't completely decide who wins a race, but certainly if you're talking about a field of 8 or 9 people who are considering running for governor, that field is going to narrow based on people's ability to raise money.
Correct. Yep, I agree.
So you have an active social media presence that we alluded to earlier, a little scrappy on certain platforms. One of the things that you have been outspoken about recently is redistricting in Mississippi. Yep. And specifically, essentially eliminating what would be a Democratic district in Benny Thompson's district with Congressional District 2, were the Supreme Court to do what people expected to do relative to the Voting Rights Act litigation.
Yep, correct.
Why do you think that is so important? And what kind of pushback have you gotten?
I think it's important because I think Mississippi needs 4 good congressmen, and we don't have 4 good congressmen right now. We have one who is, I think, been more interested in going after President Trump than in actually doing his job, in Benny Thompson. And when you look at his district, it's gerrymandered. I mean, it snakes along the Mississippi River and it juts out in these places to grab voters. And it's been drawn that way because the courts have said that Mississippi has to engage in racial gerrymandering, which I think is a bad thing. I hope that the Supreme Court comes back next year and says, you no longer have to do that. Mississippi and every other state no longer has to do that. And I think that we should redraw those lines. The interesting thing to me is that as far as I know, I've been the only statewide elected official to actually talk about this. And I think we should all agree that a gerrymandered district to protect Benny Thompson is a terrible thing and that we should fix it. Some of the pushback that I get is, well, of course, there's always the pushback of, well, you want to eliminate Benny Thompson because you're racist. Well, it's not about race. It's about who's being effective. And then another piece of pushback that I get is from some politicians who are Republicans, and they'll say, well, we don't want to redistrict because some of our folks, they like their gerrymandered districts. They want to keep their current districts. Neither of those are good reasons to avoid redistricting. We need to have good common sense districts that reflect normal geographic communities. And I think if you do that, you won't have Benny Thompson in Congress anymore, which will be great for the Delta and great for Mississippi. And you will have 4 better congressmen.
What do you say to somebody that looks at it and says, okay, in the 2023 governor's race, 48% of Mississippi voted for the Democratic candidate.
Yeah.
And the state of Mississippi is close to 40% African American. And the end result of redistricting the way that you're suggesting is to say there would be no Democrats in Congress and probably no African Americans in Congress representing Mississippi either.
I think that's an overly simplistic view of race, period. I mean, I think it's a little odd to say that a white guy can't represent a black person and a black person can't represent a white person. I think we just need good people in office, and that should be the end goal. I find a ton of people who are black folks in Mississippi who don't love Benny Thompson, and so they would prefer to have better representation. So I don't really think about the issues in terms of having to have a certain number of people of a certain race or gender or whatever it is. I just think let's have common sense districts and let's get the best possible people in there, period.
Yeah, and I guess part of that sort of pushback, though, isn't just based on race, though. It's based on this idea that you do have a sizable portion of the state that votes for Democrat, and there would be no Democratic representative in Congress.
Yeah. Well, think about it this way, too. If you continue to racially gerrymander, you're drawing districts to be hardcore Democratic districts or hardcore red districts, right? So what are you going to end up with? You're going to end up with a polarized Congress across the country. And, maybe if you had a few more districts that were a little bit closer, you'd have maybe a Republican congressman in a district here who also has to speak to the needs of the black community. So that person might end up actually being more effective at crafting meaningful policies in D.C. than the polarization that we see right now. So just something to think about as you're redoing these lines.
No, and look, I think there's some merit in what you just said, which is like currently the way that it works is that in order to preserve absolute red or absolute blue, you draw it in a way that leads to the most extreme candidate getting elected. And either one of those instances, right? And so that you might actually, if you were to allow for a more balanced representation in each district, you might actually lead to more moderate, maybe the wrong way to think about it, but more sort of sensible, pragmatic, whatever you want to call it, people potentially being able to run.
Yeah, and I think that some folks would say, well, you'll end up with more moderates. I think folks would be surprised when they actually see what comes out of those kinds of districts, because I suspect you'd end up with people who are really pro-Trump, for example, folks who want hardworking middle-class people to do well, and they're willing to stand up to some powerful interests because they've got to appeal to a whole bunch of different kinds of folks in order to win elections. So I think it's a great thing. I think more politicians should be talking about it. And I'm confused as to why more are not showing courage and getting out there on this issue. But look, I'm going to keep talking about it, and I hope that over the course of the next little while it'll change.
Yeah, there's also an element to this of like the reality that we're living in an environment where quote unquote blue states have done the same thing.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So Massachusetts is a good example of this. 40% of its population votes Republican, not a single Republican congressman.
Connecticut is exactly the same. 5 seats, 42% of people voted for President Trump, no Republican seats.
So you're either going to end up with this tit for tat situation, or you have to have a détente where people say, hey, look, everybody's got to stand down on this for it to make sense. Let me switch gears just briefly in the couple minutes that we've got left. You've talked a lot recently, and I think even before recently, about the need to reform the SNAP program. And I know the governor's picked up on this as well and has been talking about this as well, which is like, at the end of the day, if the taxpayer is the one funding these programs, then they need to fund healthy eating options so that we also don't end up funding more health care and other programs on the back end because of the poor decisions made with taxpayer money.
Absolutely, yeah. We did an audit that found that about 11% of SNAP funds in Mississippi pay for sugary drinks or candy. And there are more types of junk food than that, but just those two things consume 11% of the cost. And so we recommended that the governor, Tate Reeves, go and get permission from the Trump administration to ban the use of food stamps on those kinds of foods, and then allow food stamps to be used on things like rotisserie chicken, for example, which is a healthier food, but you can't use food stamps right now to buy that. And Tate Reeves is a decisive leader. He acted. I think he saw what we had done, and he saw other states making this move. And so his administration has now requested the right to do that from the Trump administration. I imagine they will greenlight it because the Trump administration is for this as well. And it's really just common sense, right? Like, we're not telling anybody you can't go buy candy. Just don't use my money to go buy candy. You can go buy sugary drinks if you want to, and you can make yourself unhealthy. Just don't use my money to go do that. And so I think you'll see that enacted in the short term, and we're going to have to do more reform as well. So the Trump administration in December is going to start enforcing increased work requirements on SNAP, which I think is a brilliant move. It has the potential to move up to 2 million people off of the SNAP program nationwide, which will save a ton of money, and it'll force folks to get into the workforce and get back off the couch and go to work.
So we are up against a break. You sure you don't want to announce for governor here today?
Maybe next time. I'll think about it. I'll think about it a little bit harder.
We've been talking with State Auditor Shad White. We'll have to have you back on as session gets kicked off, to share your perspective there.
Yeah, thanks, man.
You're listening to Sit Down with Russ Latino. We will be back in just a moment with Blake Levine to talk about Lane Kiffin. Stay tuned.
Since 1970, MPB has been enriching the lives of Mississippians.
Everything we do gives us the chance to grow and learn.
With your support, we are always there whenever and wherever you need us. Together through the years, together in the future. Please consider making a donation at mpbfoundation.org. MPB, your stories, our mission.
Everlasting, the Legacy Podcast, is a brand new companion podcast to the MPB documentary Everlasting, the life and legacy of Medgar Evers. Join me, Rita Brent, as we dive deeper into the story with exclusive interviews and conversations about the enduring legacy of Medgar Evers. Everlasting, the Legacy Podcast, available on the MPB app or wherever you get your podcasts, with new episodes every other week. MPB, your stories, our mission.
Together through the years, together in the future. MPB, your stories, our mission.
You're listening to The Sit Down right here on MPB Think Radio. I'm your host, Russ Latino. Had a good conversation with State Auditor Shad White. We're going to switch gears a little bit today. We say at the beginning of the show that we're going to explore the issues and people that are shaping Mississippi's future. Right now, there's a dude in North Mississippi who at least is shaping a lot of the conversation that's going on around the state of Mississippi. And candidly, a lot of the conversation that's going around the entire country right now is fixated on one, Lane Kiffin. Joining us in studio is Blake Levine, sports reporter, to break down what's going on with this Kiffin saga. What can Ole Miss expect? Is he going to LSU? Is he going to Florida? Is he going to coach Jackson Prep? Where is Lane Kiffin going? Blake, I know at the beginning of this saga, you were like, he ain't leaving Ole Miss. Are you still there?
No, I'm not there. So it has changed my opinion every single week, every single day. You probably see some of the stuff, and I just kind of do this kind of fun as a hobby, right? At the end of the day, this is what everyone wanted, Ole Miss in the national news, right? Because you guys have such a good football team, and wow, they're so good. Everyone wants your coach, and that's a good thing. And he is right when he says that, right? That, hey, this is success. This is what it looks like because, the Miami Dolphins took Nick Saban from a college, from LSU, right? So it's not – no school is, I guess, always is going to have their coach. Maybe Nick Saban at Alabama, but at some point he was going to retire. At this point, it's becoming really real because of the families, members visiting the Baton Rouge area. And, the betting odds say that Florida is the most likely to land him, and then Kenny Dillingham is the betting odds favorite for LSU, but then he's exploring all these, and then he goes on Pat McAfee and he says, no, there's no ultimatum, but then there's multiple outlets saying sources confirm there is an ultimatum. Whether there's an ultimatum or not, by the way, Russ.
That's semantics, right?
It's semantics because there is one, even if it hasn't been said. Because there has to be a decision by X date. Because Ole Miss needs to know who's going to be coaching them in the playoffs. Because I think even if they lose to Mississippi State, depending on how it is and what happens around them, I think they should be okay. It's not 100%, but I think they should be okay for a playoff. And they're going to need to know who's coaching their football team. And for the sake of LSU and Florida, they don't want to lose a 2026 recruiting class and be a step behind. And Ole Miss doesn't want that either for themselves. So someone has to make a decision.
See, and I think this is where people don't understand the way that the college football schedule is dictating a lot of this conversation. There are a lot of people right now, if you were to go on X or Instagram or TikTok or whatever, that are going, why can't he both coach in the playoffs and then go to Florida or LSU? Answer that question so people understand well the recruiting cycle problems, the problems with finding a replacement, all of that.
The recruiting cycle, the early signing day, that's a big one, right? The signing days and the recruitment for some of the biggest players in the country is before the first playoff game. How is he going to coach a playoff game while recruiting for another school, but now Ole Miss can't recruit from themselves? You lose next year for Ole Miss. Is it worth him coaching a playoff game to lose next season and lose a whole cycle of the biggest recruiting period? It's not worth it because you've built Ole Miss to a point where, let's say they got a Kenny Dillingham as their next coach, right? If he were to leave, well, you would be in the playoff discussion next year, and you don't want to lose that. And I hope for Ole Miss' sake, they are a playoff contender every single year. So you can't miss cycles of the recruiting period that is in December. And because of the scheduling, the first games are January 1st.
Yeah. So the high school signing period begins December 2nd, which is after the Egg Bowl. And then, the portal opens up at the very beginning of January. Assuming Ole Miss makes it into the playoff, wins its first game, they would still be playing at that point. And so your point is, and I think it's absolutely right, is you would have a coach who is committed to recruit for another school.
Can I say something? And you did you watch the Lane Kiffin documentary, the newest one that was on
the E60?
Yeah, right. Nick Saban sent him home when he took the job at FAU, if you remember, right? They were in the playoffs. And he was showing up late to meetings. Now, maybe he's learned something since then. But even Nick Saban looked and said, you cannot do this. You cannot be a head coach somewhere else and also be coaching for our program. And if the great Nick Saban said this isn't possible, guess what? It's probably not possible.
It's certainly very difficult to imagine that you could have divided loyalties like that and one of those places not end up getting the short end of the stick.
They would both get it.
They arguably would both get the short end of the stick. But the place you're leaving probably gets the shorter end of the stick, assuming that you're leaving.
I actually think it would be quite equal, right? Because at least you could make the case, and for Ole Miss's purposes, let's say they hired Pete Golding as their next, Joe Judge as their next coach. Well, you're already there, and you're already talking to the same kids that you were probably already talking to. I actually think there's a weird dynamic where it actually could be where he's going next that could get the shorter end of the stick. I think Ole Miss would get maybe 85% of what they got. I think, if you're LSU, how can he spend the time preparing for a game? I mean, think about how many hours do you think Ole Miss or Lane Kiffin and his coaches spend for a week game? 80 hours, 90 hours, 100 hours?
Probably at least, yeah.
How could he recruit during that period?
Yeah, it's difficult. Certainly difficult.
I mean, he's already going to be coaching at 10 different places. I mean, the free time is
unless you're not
limited.
spending the 80 or 90 hours.
In which case, that's disrespectful to the school that you're at.
Correct. So the other thing that you mentioned there that I think is really important is not only are you potentially missing an entire recruiting cycle for both schools, or a really disrupted recruiting cycle, but if he were to leave Ole Miss, they are missing out on coaches, right? If he doesn't leave Ole Miss until January, all of the coaches at that point have aligned with where they're going, or most every coach in the country has already aligned with where they're going. So you are left with the scenario where you've got to promote internally and not do a nationwide search.
And Mississippi State saw how that could be a bad thing.
Or you've got to go ahead and line somebody up and tell them that they need to stay sidelined up until the point that Lane leaves.
Yeah, absolutely. Although I will say this, and some people call me a homer, and I'd say this for anybody. Ole Miss, if they were to be late into the coaching search, might be a name that comes up from a school that you didn't realize was open until it became open, right? Because let's say I coach at X school. Well, nobody thought that person was available. Well, when the Ole Miss job came available, he became available.
Sure.
And so there is that type of dynamic too.
So here's my general take on all of this. One, I'm deeply appreciative of what Lane Kiffin has done at Ole Miss, because the fact is we were nowhere near the program that we currently are and would not have been. There are a lot of people right now saying, oh, there are lots of factors that went into us becoming this. And some of those other factors are also true. Certainly the university decided to put a whole lot more money into NIL as an example. Certainly Keith Carter is a phenomenal AD that we didn't have in the past at the University of Mississippi. But our program is where it is because Lane Kiffin is a football genius, and he, for once in his life, exorcised demons that had plagued him at other places and got centered and focused on letting that genius shine. Do you agree with that?
Parts of it.
Okay, well, tell me what you don't agree with.
I'm not fully convinced he's fully made the whole turnaround personally. The stuff that he's done on social media, leaving a school before a playoff, no matter how bad. I mean, I understand the calendar. It's still pretty dirty work. However, I believe that the Auburn noise, and John Talty, the writer, had a really good story.
CBS,
yeah, had a really good story about this. The NIL, after he almost went to Auburn, exploded after that specific moment. Because if you remember, they were really good prior to the Auburn stuff. It's like after the Auburn stuff, do you remember that? I mean, last year we thought that was going to be the team that could, really, and all of a sudden it's like, no, that was the starting point, and now it's just going to keep getting better if he stays in the NIL. And any coach that comes in is going to get a good bucket, right? I don't think it's that far off some of these. I mean, maybe it's not going to be Ohio State, right? It's never going to be that, but I don't think it's that far off the Floridas and LSU. I mean, it's gotten pretty good.
Yeah, they've been top 10 for the last few years in terms of NIL money. So here's where I actually think we do agree. When I say that he was refocused, I mean, I do believe the part about him getting sober. I do believe the part about him focusing more on his family. And I do think he focused more on the game of football. Does a zebra change its stripes entirely? No. And I think that's the second part of what I would say Russ's view of it is like deeply appreciative of everything you've done. But the way, even if you choose to leave, I'm not going to begrudge him if he looks at LSU and says, that's a better opportunity for me to win a national championship. Don't begrudge that at all. I think going on Twitter and posting a visor that says Lane Kiffin 2026 in Ole Miss colors,
it's messed up.
And then if you choose to leave, it really is the middle finger to a fan base that has been incredibly loyal and supportive.
Why does he have to be on social media? I don't understand that, right? Like, he could just go silent. Now, that would also be a sign, and fans would go, why is he going silent on social media right now? Is he definitely leaving? So, but I'm telling you, that would be a better way to do it. Even though he would get some, pushback, it would be the better way to go about it.
Yeah, and I would argue the better way to go about it is not to go silent, but to make, if you're going to be on social media, talk about the Egg Bowl. Talk about your team.
Yeah.
Talk about the excellent players on your team, which he does some of that. Don't mix in this sort of lane-centric stuff. Everybody knows you're the man, right? That's well established. You got 3 schools desperately competing for you. They all know you're the man. You don't have to go out and tell people that you're the man. You don't have to remind people of that. He retweeted something the other day that was a sports reporter mentioning that, Ole Miss fans were chanting, "We want Lane" at the end of the Florida game, and then so were the Florida fans. And he retweeted that. And I'm like, what's the point of letting people know that you're wanted?
How many more years does Ole Miss want to go through this cycle of him possibly leaving? I mean, in all seriousness, right? I mean, is it fun for the administration and fans to do this every single year?
So I would push back on that and say this, though. And if you're listening, I'm an Ole Miss guy. I went to law school at Ole Miss. I went to undergrad at Tulane, both of them in the college football bracket right now, playoff bracket right now. We'll see if Tulane sticks or not. James Madison's mad. I would say this. I don't think it's fair to say this has happened every year, right? 2022 was the last time this happened. So we're talking about a few years. At some level, I expect other schools will continue to want Lane Kiffin if he stays at Ole Miss. And look, I'm also not a fatalist. I think there's a chance he stays at Ole Miss.
100%.
Right? I mean, I think there's a good chance that he stays at Ole Miss. I don't know if it's 50-50 or 40-60 or...
Someone asked me, I said it was 60-40. I thought he was leaving. But but that's not a crazy number, right? I'm saying 40% chance. Go play blackjack. You got some pretty good odds.
I would just love to think, that he talks about that text group that he's on with Kirby Smart and some of those other guys. He obviously has a good relationship with Nick Saban. Those guys at times have had to make hard career decisions that have made fan bases mad, right? But I'd like to think that they would tell him, hey, dude, there's a way to do this. And there are always going to be some mad people. But there's a way to do this where you don't literally stomp all over the folks who have been supportive of you, whether you're leaving or staying. So he could stay, and there's still going to be a degree of Ole Miss's fan base that goes, this was all unnecessary. It was childish. It distracted from our best season ever.
Yeah, but I think the general fan is not that distracted of how great the season's been, right? I mean, I think those are the loud people on social media, and that the general, fans are just really excited about everything that's going on, right? Because you're not I don't find you as a person that's going on social media like, oh my goodness, why are we so, it's like you recognize you're having fun with this, right? You're having a great time with this season.
Sure.
Yeah, I think the general fan is not that, delusional of, man, this is ruined. No, it's not. Come on. It's not ruining the season by any means. It is what it is. It sucks. But at the end of the day, you guys are going to as long as you beat Mississippi State, you're going to have a home playoff game in Oxford. Think about that. What that's going to be like. You thought that Florida game was fun and exciting with the light shows and the fans? Well, what's the home playoff game going to look like when Miami rolls in?
Yeah, no, look, and I agree with you, but I think two things can be true at once, and we got to take a break. We'll come back and talk Egg Bowl. I think it can be absolutely true that this season is one worth celebrating, that Lane Kiffin deserves the lion's share of the credit for it, and simultaneously true that there's a way to go about doing, even if he's looking for another job, there's a way to do it where it doesn't become as big of a distraction as what it has been so far. You're listening to The Sit Down. We're talking with Blake Levine. We'll be right back, and we'll talk about the Egg Bowl, which is what we should be talking about right now.
That's what I'm thinking.
Destroys the one who hates. The others that you hated, go on about their business. Care of us.
So the legacy of Medgar Evers is an understanding of our own humanity and of our own responsibility of seeing that in other people.
he is written out of history. He's just not included as Malcolm and Martin. To me, it's the 3 M's, and Medgar's right up there at the lead.
Everlasting, Life and Legacy of Medgar Evers. Watch now on MPB Passport. Visit mpbonline.org for more.
The Measuring Show.
Since 1970, MPB has been enriching the lives of Mississippians.
Everything we do gives us the chance to grow and learn.
With your support, we are always there whenever and wherever you need us. Together through the years, together in the future. Please consider making a donation at mpbfoundation.org. MPB, your stories, our mission.
Mississippi is a place of deep roots where every story matters and every voice can be heard. At MPB, we stand with our local communities, bringing you the voices of those who shape our state through local programming that reflects our culture across small towns to big cities, from the Delta to the coast. We tell the stories that define us, from the music that carries our voices to the leaders who inspire change. MPB brings you the heart of Mississippi, celebrating Mississippi one story at a time. MPB, your stories, our mission.
Right here on MPB Think Radio. I'm your host, Russ Latino, talking with Blake Levine, sports impresario, knower of things.
Yeah, sports fan.
Opinionated fella.
Yeah, how about that one?
So, we were talking about Lane Kiffin. Obviously, that's a big story right now in Mississippi, across the country. Ole Miss fans have a lot of strong feelings right now about what's going on, including this guy. If you're sitting here today and you were to place a bet, LSU, Florida, or Ole Miss, which one are you going with?
Well, because the betting odds say so, probably Florida.
You're just going to follow the crowd.
Those people that make those lines are so good.
No, I know.
They're so good at that stuff. I mean, those are like MIT students that know, and then they get those. I like to know who their sources are. Like, their sources got to be better than like the journalist sources. I mean, it's insane the kind of stuff that those people are able to do.
Yeah. I see, and I've seen the odds, and I agree with you that they normally are very spot on. I think it's LSU or Ole Miss. I really do. I think Florida's been used at some level. All the word is that Mr. Sexton is a fan of LSU and their interim AD, and is pushing Lane that direction. We'll see.
I wouldn't want to get involved with the governor over there. Politics aside, I just don't like the governor meddling in sports.
Yeah, no, I think that would be a point of detraction if I was looking at a job and I was a coach. It's like, how many people are going to be telling me how to do my job?
Well, that, and he already said that they're not going to do the same buyout as everyone else does. And well,
then you're not going to compete for a coach.
Then you're not going to compete at that same level. You're going to need somebody that just wants to coach LSU because they want to coach LSU. And if you're telling me that if Lane Kiffin signs with Ole Miss and the buyout's $60 million and LSU it's 15, I'm sorry, that's a massive gap. But that's if the governor's involved, he may want to do it that way. It's okay. They can hire John Summerall.
Without all of that, though, the LSU job should be one of the best jobs in the entire country.
Should be.
But it's
not.
They've got no in-state competition for their talent pool, which is massive. And there's a lot of money in Louisiana. There's a lot of money in a lot of states, but those folks love LSU football. And the amount of money that they could potentially put into that program is massive.
But I do believe when Nick Saban says, are we sure it's that much better or a better job than Ole Miss at the moment? Because things go in waves. And what we're talking about, obviously, is some pre-NIL and then now some NIL bucket that they have of money and fandom. But at the same time, they didn't like Brian Kelly personally. He was still winning 9.5, 10 games there. I mean, it wasn't like it wasn't devastating. This year was maybe more devastating, but when you really looked at it, right, it wasn't like it was like, oh man, like they're 500. It's like, and at Ole Miss, if Lane Kiffin went 8-5 next year, 8-4 in the regular season, lost some bowl game because guys transferred out, there'd be a few dummy fans saying, "Oh, he's hot seat fight or whatever." But he's got a long leeway.
His leash at Ole Miss is longer than it'll be at Florida or LSU. Let's talk about the Egg Bowl in the 3 minutes that we've got left. Give me a sense of how you think that game goes. Could Ole Miss get upset because of all this distraction, or you think inside the building it's not really going to affect performance?
Look, it's the Egg Bowl. You expect one result. When I put this thing on paper, I go, okay, Ole Miss should win this game 10 to 14 points. However, we've seen over the years, one way or the other, one team is better than the other, and then the upsets happen, funky stuff happens. A few years back, Ole Miss was favored by, 27 points, and then all of a sudden it was a one-score game or so. Yeah. So that's going to be tough. I don't think the distraction is that bad. They've been dealing with the distraction now for weeks, and they beat Florida by 10. They went on the road and beat Oklahoma. Ole Miss, the only school in the top 12 that has beat two teams that are currently in the top 12. They have the most playoff wins against playoff opponents, or wins against playoff opponents. However, I just don't know how, with the offensive line issues that Mississippi State has and how well the defensive line is playing at Ole Miss. We saw what Missouri just did to them. I mean, if you have a good defensive line, Mississippi State's going to have problems blocking you. And then on the other side of things, Mississippi State's defense that looks so improved for so long during the season, where I was like, you know what? It's not great, but they compete, has now started to really fade fast late in the year.
Yeah.
Ahmad Hardy runs for 300 yards just by himself. Ole Miss's running attack is just as good as Missouri's running attack.
Yeah, certainly Lacey is right up there. It is crazy that no Mississippi school took Hardy, or really even pursued Hardy.
Southern Miss came in really late at some point, but how much time I got? Not enough.
A minute?
Not enough. I interviewed him in high school, right? And great kid, and the coach was telling me how great he was. I didn't believe the coach. I thought he was just hyping up his own kid. But Ahmad Hardy, really good, happy for him. If Coach Drink leaves, I wouldn't be surprised if he.
If somebody comes snatches it up.
Yeah.
Give me a score prediction for the Egg Bowl.
38-27, Ole Miss.
Okay. We'll see.
You like that one?
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know. On paper, it seems like Ole Miss should win this game. It's always a tough game. In 2022, when he was flirting with Auburn, we lost 4 of our last 5. Hopefully, the team is not as distracted now as it was then. But anything can happen. And I do think if Ole Miss loses the Egg Bowl, though, that will increase some of the national scrutiny on Lane Kiffin. It is going to get uglier and not prettier for him if he were to lose the Egg Bowl and then take a step aside.
Here's the real prediction. There'll be a resolution before the game.
The Sit Down is a production of Mississippi Public Broadcasting, Think Radio, made possible thanks to the generous support of listeners like you. If you enjoy the guests and sit-downs we bring each week, please consider making a contribution to keep shows like this on the air. Visit mpbonline.org or show your support using the MPB Public Media app. Today's show was produced by the always wonderful Germaine Flood with live stream production by Abram Nanny. For my guests, Shad White, Blake Levine, I'm Russ Latino. Stay tuned for Southern Remedy right here at 11 a.m. and join us next week for a new episode of The Sit Down, heard only on MPB Think Radio.